You are being watched. Actually, that's kind of an unsettling way to begin, but this is the whole point of panopticism. The illusion of authority and power feeds off of the fear of being watched. Your behavior is altered when there's the possibility that someone is monitoring you to some extent. There's a motivation for you to conform to their expectations, and so you must behave the way those watching you expect you to. This concept centered around visibility, the dynamics of power, and discipline can be applied to various modern-day situations, one of which includes the common household. Foucault describes Bentham's Panopticon, a ring structure of well-lit cells surrounding a dark and obscure tower with wide windows that allow for monitoring. An ideal panopticon is defined by a structure in which power is exerted naturally over subjects due to the geometry or non-manually regulated conditions of the institution. A panopticon uses the illusion of permanent visibility, physical or otherwise, to influence the behavior of its subjects. There is implied power from natural conditions, although the causes and how that power is put into effect may vary for various forms of panopticons. As long as the illusion of permanent visibility is there, it can be considered a panopticon. Bentham's ideal panopticon structure utilizes invisibility and uncertainty to give the illusion of constant surveillance and authority. This ideal form relies on explicitly visual aspects, but may not necessarily extend to other panopticons. For example, universities monitor students for qualities that they seek in their prospective applicants, but do not take the time to stalk every individual. A household can be defined as the people living in the same domestic structure, whether it be an apartment, a house, or otherwise, or may include the structure itself. Households can vary in number of individuals, the people involved, and the physical structure containing said people. Let's assume we have a house situation with 3 adults and 3 minors of varying ages. They don't have to be related to each other. Comparing the structure of Bentham's panopticon structure to a household, we see stark differences at first. The former is a large open chamber with numerous cells flooded with light with a dark central tower, compared to a household with rooms that aren't visible all the time and give a sense of temporary privacy. They are so different in nature that a household doesn't seem like a panopticon. One is an explicit disciplinary mechanism, but the other provides some freedom to roam and go about doing daily activities. They do, however, have the capability to be very similar when we redefine permanent visibility to include the potential for visibility or perception via non-visual means. We can use the terminology potential for perception. Note that a panopticon does not necessarily require intense supervision. As long as the illusion of visibility is there, it is defined as one. A central hallway of a household can be considered physically analogous to the central tower in Bentham's panopticon, but it's not necessary to lurk in the hallway and peer in adjacent rooms to perceive other people's actions. The literal visual way of monitoring varies based on the structure of the household, and whether or not you have carpet floors or soundproof walls. But the idea that the individual is monitored by the presence of other individuals in the household extends to nearly every situation. Bentham's panopticon can serve multiple purposes because the idea of control is so prominently emphasized. The cells can house subjects, patients, prisoners, and even students. Panopticons don't necessarily have to be versatile in function. Foucault was just appreciating Bentham's deliberate architectural choices that enabled a wide myriad of applications. A household has a more specific function, to sustain the quality of life for every individual who resides there. This houses and nurtures individuals to develop for most of their lives and fosters symbiotic relationships. A household takes care of people by supplying each other with various resources such as housing, labor, food, heating, amenities, etc. The purpose of a household is to provide and nurture. In order to ensure that everyone is productive and benefiting themselves or other people in any shape or form, knowledge of what everyone else is doing is crucial. Parents monitor their children from time to time to ensure they are on top of their schoolwork, more than ever due to homeschooling during the COVID-19 pandemic. In Bentham's panopticon, the visibility of the prisoners puts them in a situation where they believe they are consciously being watched. Prisoners then feel vulnerable, being viewed as pieces of information that are being observed. The invisibility of the captor or supervisor is crucial in order to give them a sense of implied authority. Any number of persons, known or unknown, could be in the watchtower, increasing the prisoner's anxiousness and awareness of being observed. Invisibility in a household, by contrast, may be a little more difficult to execute, but it can certainly be a panopticon, especially with the right angles and positioning. With thin walls, freedom of movement, and people of authority in close proximity, individuals are still supervised by other means, using cameras, perception of noise, or silently watching from the hallway. Typically, the adults who own the house are in charge and delegate tasks downwards to those lower in status or in the hierarchy. They typically shoulder the most responsibility, bringing in income to purchase groceries, food, and other amenities, have paid for the domestic structure, and have assumed automatic authority if considered a parent. In a family setting, usually minors are part of this system involuntarily, whereas individuals with more financial independence are there voluntarily. There is no explicitly stated hierarchy, but it is assumed that the homeowner, the adults, and the elders are to be respected and have automatic authority over minors. From a panopticon perspective, however, adult authority does not play more of a role than minors do in checking the actions of older individuals. Is it the people who observe that have the power? Usually. Conversely, the people being observed are subject to that power. But does there necessarily have to be someone watching for them to exert influence? Not if they're invisible. If those watching are able to react to the actions of the subjects and administer consequences, that should be enough to essentially scare subjects into behaving. In Bentham's Panopticon, subjects being watched are stuck in enclosed, well-lit spaces. However, everyone is both the observer and the observed in a household because anyone can interact with anyone else at any time. Younger kids like to run amok and relay information everywhere. Adults with assumed authority can walk in the room any minute to monitor, or may be silently doing so from the hallway. Cameras may be planted around outside the house as well. From each person's perspective, since there are so many people and so much potential to be monitored, they are in a well-lit cell where they are constantly visible and everyone else is the tower. Foucault states that in a panopticon, people are in an arrangement whose internal mechanisms produce the relation in which individuals are caught up. In other words, power exerted upon someone comes from themselves, because they are aware of the fact that anyone can come in and monitor anytime. Some households like to make an explicit set of rules, but mine in particular does not. Expectations are either presumed or situationally applied. Some rules include: listen and perform or delegate tasks assigned to you by those with more power in the hierarchy. Leave doors open, but even if they're closed, there's still a means of obtaining information from being in close proximity. Don't speak out of turn. Come immediately when summoned by name unless if you physically can't. Destruction of property is prohibited. No harm should be done to yourself or other persons in the household, so basic rules of safety. You should be doing something productive at all times unless if you've designated time for breaks or downtime. Minors shouldn't do anything that adults in the house prohibit, and likewise, adults should act as a role model for the minors inside the household. These rules imply some sort of disciplinary structure, but not as intense as a prison panopticon would be. These outline some of the behaviors individuals are expected to adhere to. They have to abide by them at all times because there is always potential for visibility. I understood the household as a system of people who work symbiotically, but Foucault would see the household as a hierarchy of power where everyone is both captive and captor. Foucault would recognize that power comes from the illusion of being monitored at any time, regardless of the household power hierarchy. Not only do children have to conform to those rules, but adults are also obligated to keep themselves in check in order to be a role model, or to not seem hypercritical. Foucault would be blind to the age and experience of the individuals in the household. Again, everyone is considered a supervisor and the subject of supervision because everyone acts as a check on each other. Smaller children have power too. They tend to report on any sightings and observations of other members within the household, including anything that may violate authority. This power institution in this case does not solely rely on constant physical visibility, but rather the potential for random and erratic checks from time to time. Both Bentham's ideal panopticon and the household successfully use awareness to enforce discipline. Yes, the Foucault analysis aided me in understanding the household as an extended example of a panopticon. I initially thought that a household would be too different from Bentham's architecture, because Foucault's definition did not suit the situation in a literal sense, where a disciplinary model with constant surveillance and dire consequences coerced people to behave in a heavily regulated setting. A household does, however, follow the same principles and dynamics of power, just not in the exact same manner that we see in Bentham's Panopticon. Instead of being constricted to spaces, subjects are free to move about and therefore act as a check on each other's behavior. This analysis helped me to see that authority truly does not come from a person or entity, but comes from the people subject to authority themselves. A strict disciplinary setting does not have to look as daunting as Bentham's ideal architecture in order to be considered a panopticon.